Yes. Hi, Doug. Good morning.
Hi, Jagat. How are you?
Yes, good, good. And you're looking younger than last time I met you.
That's probably because you're
Uh,
younger as well. I think
okay, thank you.
perhaps international trade keeps us young.
Yeah, right. So, friends, here we are talking to Doug, who is the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. He is a chemical engineer and has a master's in management. And I didn't know before, but I think many of you also may not know that he has got 5 patents to his name. Right, Doug?
That's correct.
Yeah, and he speaks 4 languages. This is also I did not know. So very rightly, global chamber is the right word. And he has worked with corporates like Johnson and Johnson and Phelps Dodge and Data Preserve and Growth Nation. And then he started Global Chamber, which I've always believed that it has been very ahead of time. It has been visionary. And I don't know when he started Global Chamber, he must have thought about coronavirus, right? But today the whole world is actually on the model on which Global Chamber is being run. The whole world is following that, and it was very visionary. So, Doug, I would like to ask you some questions, and I would like all the viewers, my followers. I have 1 million followers on my social media, various platforms, and I do a lot of work in India and abroad. I want them to know about you and about Global Chamber. So, first of all, Doug, can you tell me where were you born and where did you, where were you brought up?
Sure. No, happy to answer that. And again, thank you for the opportunity to share with your community. I am an American. My heritage is German and Polish. I was born in a place called Mount Kisco, New York, which they call upstate New York, which is only about 30 miles north of New York City. So my great grandmother, Paula Gertz Bruhnke, was the one that brought us to the New York area. Most of the Brunkes are, there's only about 200 of them in the US, a very unusual name. Most of them are in the Chicago area. My great grandmother was the only one that diverted off to New York, and hence the Brunkes in New York are all part of my family.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's some history. Okay. So, and where are you based now?
I'm based in two places. So I've got a foot in Scottsdale, Arizona, US, and also Palo Alto, California, which is a little bit more famous. I've been very fortunate to have lived in a lot of different places, consider a lot of places my hometown, from New York originally, to Utah, Texas, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Japan, Michigan, Singapore, Arizona, and now California as well. So I've been very fortunate to live in a lot of places, and some
Oh,
really good places as well.
okay. Right. So, Doug, tell me something about your career. Like, which year did you start working? Where you worked? What were your functions and your other career still till you started Global Chamber?
So it's actually been coming up to my 40 years graduating from college and starting my career with the DuPont company. I was had two different paths I could have taken. My dad was not an entrepreneur. He was a very smart electrical systems engineer. He actually worked on the U-2 spy plane, some very sophisticated top secret government projects through IBM primarily, and he retired with IBM. He took a very traditional route. He always talked about starting up his own company, and he never did. Uh, my grandfather, my mom's father, however, was entrepreneurial. So he was 50 years old working as a machinist at a shop, by far the best person in the New York City area doing that kind of work with a partner who owned the business. And one day, my grandfather overheard him at lunch say, "Oh, Joe, he's never going to be a part owner." So my grandfather heard that, my grandfather Joseph Brings, and he left. He picked up his lunch, he left the building, never talked to Mr. Meyer again.
Wow.
He went home, he nailed a nail into the wall in the basement, and my grandmother came down and was like, Joe, what are you doing home? What's going on? He says, I'm starting my own business. 50 years
Wow.
old, my mother was 12, my uncle was 8, and my grandmother started crying, saying, Joe, no, go back to work immediately. This is crazy. You have kids, you have a family. This is not the right time to do this. And kind of long story short, my grandfather, my pops, what we call him, really was my mentor for most of my life. I've watched him be very successful in his business. He retired. He became the oldest person in New York State to become a pilot, to get a pilot's license. Very dynamic, very entrepreneurial, and really was kind of my dream. So contrary to my father, I would say my grandfather really got me to become the entrepreneur eventually that I became.
Wow, this is like a script for a film.
That's very funny.
Yeah, right. Okay, so Doug, you have 5 patents, right? Wow. So
I do.
how did that come about?
So one of the great things about having an interesting business career is you get to hang out with some really smart people like you. And
Thank you.
so I've always been a mingler. I've always been a connector. And so, as you mentioned, I'm a chemical engineer originally. So I'm not really a classic chemical engineer. I'm somebody who's more around involved with being a catalyst, being a chemical catalyst between people and ideas. And so I hired into DuPont out of college as a chemical engineer, and it was a program that required that I move every 2 years, different programs, different location. And so I ended up, as part of that, my third assignment, they said, hey, we have an idea. Let's bring an engineer into our central research department. So this was DuPont's big place where they've invented Teflon and nylon. In fact, I worked in the building where Wallace Carruthers invented nylon.
Oh,
They
okay.
said, let's bring an engineer in there and have him manage the really smart people, because the smart people, they're just doing stuff off track. They need to be more focused in on commercial applications. We need to invent another nylon, another Teflon. So let's put Doug in there as a guinea pig. So basically, I was a supervisor of people. One guy had 84 patents. Another guy had 50 something patents. They're brilliant people. And so all I really needed to do was go into work. And lo and behold, through that activity, there were 5 patents, mainly on chlorofluorination chemistry, which nobody knows about. But what you may know about is it kind of was a byproduct of the Freon. Some of us are old enough, you're too young, Jagat, but when Freons were a bad thing, and basically DuPont was the main supplier of that,
Yes.
when they were looking for alternatives to Freon, it ended up being chlorofluorochemistry. 134A was the alternative. And out of that chemistry came the work that I was doing that turned out to be a variety of different products. But hanging out with smart people is always a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So, Doug, I met you in 2017 in US, and I used to wonder, and even now I wonder. So there are all these chambers of commerce in all the cities, right? In my city, in your city, we have got chamber of commerce, which primarily works with the locals, and they have some connection with outside. Then we have bilateral chambers of commerce. So we have Indo-US chamber maybe, or Indo-German chamber. So these chambers, they work country to country. Very few. I don't know any. Maybe you can correct me, but I don't know any which is multilateral chamber between many countries. So when I met you first time, when I understood your business model, I was like zap. And I had never known. I have been in international business for 25 years. I had never known that this multilateral kind of a chamber. So that was an amazing thing. So what I want to know, Doug, is when and how did you first think about this innovative and unique concept of global chamber?
Sure, there were a couple key things associated with the development of it. I think certainly one is my own personality. I'm very global. I think in global, and part of that is I've lived in so many places, and in each place there's always people that say, "Oh, our place is the best." And
Hmm.
I've lived in so many places. Quite honestly, I'm not sure what's best. There's so many great places. I've traveled to
Right.
India, and across India, there's amazing things there. You know, the temples, the people, the food, it's extraordinary. If I actually had lived there yet, and maybe I will, you know, it would be another hometown that would be impressive. So global people like myself typically have a bug, if you will, for travel, and we think maybe outside of countries, outside of regions, and think about the commonalities between people. So I think that was one thing. Another thing was a senator, former senator for the state of Arizona. His son stood up in a meeting about what 12 years or so ago and said, "We need to keep foreigners out of Arizona because they take our jobs." And so, as a Globie and as someone I think who understands how America got to be what it is immigrants are key. That's my family are immigrants. Immigrants have created most of the Fortune 500 companies. People want, historically, people have wanted to live in the US. And so he was wrong. Or I believe he's totally wrong. So I said, hey, I've got to start something. I've got to start educating people that immigration and foreign investment and doing international business is the way. So I started once a month doing a traditional type of group that said, hey, let's talk about exporting. Let's talk about foreign direct investment. The last piece of the third piece was I drove to San Diego from Arizona. So it's about 5.5, 6 hours drive to a World Trade Center event in San Diego. And so I drive these 6 hours to a wine and cheese event that I thought would be, hey, I get to meet the international community of San Diego. So I was tired and I was cranky, and I got there and the cheese wasn't very good and the wine was terrible. And it was a group of people that were not the Jagat Shahs of San Diego. If there are, probably nobody is a Jagat Shah of San Diego, but they were kind of not really inspiring people. And I thought to myself, yikes, you know, as an international person, this is not a way to do business. This is not a way to interact and find contacts and resources and clients. It's a needle in a haystack. There's got to be a better way. So I think those three elements were kind of key for Global Chamber to finally launch 5 years ago.
Oh wow, that's some background to Global Chamber. Very interesting. Yeah, your logic is very correct. So Doug, which was the first chapter you started and where? And which
So
was the
we
year?
actually did three pretty much all at once over a 2 week period of time. So in November of 2014, so a little bit over 5 years ago, we launched in Phoenix, Arizona, which is
Hmm.
the Metro Phoenix area, where I'm based in Scottsdale, is within the Phoenix metro area. Tucson, Arizona, which is about a 2 hour drive south. So between Tucson and Phoenix, they cover the entire state of Arizona, about 7 million people. And the third chapter that launched right about the same time was Salt Lake City, Utah, which basically covers the entire state. And I'm trying to remember, I think there's about 5 or 6 million people within the state of Arizona. So three relatively small but important places, all of which I know very well. And that was a kind of a key is, I want to start this thing with areas where I have a lot of contacts myself, so I can get some traction early and kind of go from there.
Okay. So when was your first overseas chapter launched, and where was it?
So that was a kind of a weird situation because I've lived in Japan,
Right.
and so Tokyo was an important piece of, I figured, very early on. So turned out within the first year of Global Chamber, the first year I would say was pretty tied up with getting the systems and the website and working on shifting from a free service to a pay service. So there was a pretty much of a year of working on the processes. But after about a year, we started thinking, hey, let's build this. So we hosted the ambassador for Japan in Arizona. So the Japanese ambassador to the U.S. And it was a great event. It was spectacular. And in that, he brought several people in his delegation, one of whom was very business oriented fellow. And lo and behold, we had the conversation. He very well connected in Japan, like we try to find people that are really deeply connected. And Nobuo became our Global Chamber Tokyo chapter, and off we went in an overseas direction. So I don't remember how many chapters we had by then. One of the keys early on was not to be US centric. There is a US chamber that, as an American, I find a little bit almost offensive, but in a way that any country is, right? Every country is very, we call it in the US, we're a homer. We root for the home team. Everything is in the US chamber is for the US. And we all know in our own countries, we have organizations that are for our own country, and that's great. What we're for, however, is trade everywhere. And so my focus has been differentiating ourselves from those groups, but collaborating. So we collaborate with the US Chamber. We collaborate with JETRO in Japan. We collaborate with MITA, the Malaysian Investment Development Agency. We collaborate with those groups that are quote unquote homers, trying to get investment or helping their companies succeed. We love that. We think that's great. They do great work and work that we can't do, but they can't do a lot of the things that we do that's cross-border or credibility between, let's say, any country that's, say, Malaysia. I love the Malaysians and what they do, but when they're talking to an American, there's a little bit of a skeptical view. But if an American starts talking about Malaysia, that's a different story. It's like, yeah, you need to consider it. So there are roles like that Global Chamber plays that we love playing, and we love collaborating with all of those groups.
Okay, excellent. So when you opened your first overseas chapter in Japan, what was the biggest challenging task you faced? Like, what was the biggest challenge to get it running and acceptable?
I would say it's probably momentum to what you said earlier about kind of the way things are, the typical chambers, the typical way we've always done things. In Japan, it was actually a little bit even more than that. One of the driving forces for me with Global Chamber is creating or sharing best practices across countries. So one of the best practices, I think, is having women play a role in business. There's no reason why women can't have a role in doing business. I learned that when I was running a joint venture in Japan earlier in my career, where we had the smartest person in really probably the company, but certainly in our Osaka office, was an office lady, what they call an OL. And I said, you should get her in sales. We need more help in sales. And they said,
Right.
There's no way in the world she can do sales. Toyota will never buy from a woman, is what I was told. So, which, it's like, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. That got to be wrong. So those of you who have done work in Japan know to get people to change very often, instead of just saying, no, this is going to be it. We actually, several months, I went out to dinner and did a lot of drinking with these people to say, look, we got to try this. My name and reputation is on the line. Believe me, we'll make this work. And lo and behold, they tried it, and no surprise, she was the best salesperson they ever had. So we tried to get that to happen. And so in Tokyo, however, our chapter has been a little bit behind the curve around understanding the value and understanding about working with women in leadership. And so I've had to do a little bit of that on the side. And so I would say the normal stuff with countries of the traditional chambers and trying to be able to collaborate with them is always an issue. But issues around cultural behaviors and things like that to me seem natural, like women in the workplace, are areas too where I think are both challenges, but I think ultimately are great opportunities.
Absolutely. In fact, while you were talking, I recall when I was doing this mentor on road trip in US. So that time I was also promoting this United Nations Women program called uh, 50-50 by 2030, where their goal is to
Oh,
have gender equality. So that's quite an interesting background you told about Japan. So, Doug, how many chapters do you have now operational across the world? In
so
how
the
many
way
countries?
so it was actually an intern the summer before we launched. So almost 6 years ago now, she actually went through the whole world and split it up into 525 plus minus chapters. And so what we call a chapter is an area, a metro area of at least a million. Um,
Okay.
Many times they're much larger than that, but at least a million, and it includes the surrounding area. So that's why the state of Arizona, there's two chapters. The state of Indiana is roughly the same population, but there's only one chapter. It's in Indianapolis, but it covers the entire state. There's actually 92 counties. So Indiana's split into
Okay.
92 more subsegments. But our person in Indiana has actually been to all 92. Some of
Wow.
the other chapters are Tokyo, very large, Jakarta, very large, Mumbai, very large. So they range, or another, probably the biggest one is the country of Cameroon. So the chapter of Douala captures all of the country of Cameroon, which is, I believe, around 30 million plus people. Very little bit different business. So the 525 has really stayed. And so we have members in almost all of them, and we
Wow.
help almost all of them. When we originally started, we thought, well, we should have two prices, one for chapters where there's a person on our team and other chapters where there's just a member. But what we found was when there's a member there, we can actually connect them to around the world. We can give them an opportunity to speak in presentations. And so the value for them is almost as high as a chapter that has actually events. And now that we're not doing events locally because of the COVID-19,
Right.
it's more equilibrated the whole system. So really, we've got 525 chapters. We're everywhere in the world, every country, except a couple countries where we're not allowed to do business.
Oh, okay. Right. That's amazing. I don't know of any equivalent chamber or organization in the world with such kind of a reach. Congratulations. So,
Thank
Doug,
you.
what type of companies and professionals join as member with the Global Chamber? My audience would like to know, like, what type of companies would do you have in your membership base?
So there's three main groups. So the main focus and the target that we look for Global Chamber are exporters. And within that group, we would also lump in importers and cross-border investors. So that's the main group. It's the actual people doing business across borders. Those are our peeps. That's the global tribe focus for Global Chamber. So we help them do their international business. The second layer around that are service providers. So these are the banks and the lawyers and consultants of every ilk that want to meet the exporters, want to meet the importers, want to meet the cross-border investors because they have a service that they often don't know about, but they can benefit from. So that's the kind of the second tier, and then the third tier are groups that would be a variety. So it's universities and economic development organizations within cities and provinces and states and countries, and a variety of other people who are kind of the part of the ecosystem. So together, the core group that are led by exporters, the secondary group are the service providers, and then the other group, that's what we call the global tribe. So the people like you, Jagat, who walk through life with your international filter, and almost everything you see is through that cross-cultural, cross-border filter. Most people in the world don't have that. They have a
Correct.
very local focus. You have that global perspective, and one of the reasons why we collaborate so well. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for the appreciation for that basic model of helping
No.
people be more successful. The world is a tricky place, and it's harder to do that work overseas. And so our vision and our mission is, how do we make selling across borders just as easy as selling across the street? even easier. And I think it can be.
True, absolutely. You on the dot you mentioned. And I mean, those three layers which you mentioned covers very wide range of companies. So that is quite interesting. So Doug, if you have to say three things, if someone wants to be a member, what are the three things they benefit?
So number one, and first and foremost, it's always been a key part of Global Chamber is we want to understand your business. So we always have an onboarding conversation. And when we onboard, we're asking primarily, who are you targeting as a client? Who do you want? And so we actually have about a 3-page questionnaire that we have on our side. We don't bother the members with that, but we use that 3-page to really dig deep onto understanding that. So we have a network of 35 million people around the world that we can introduce our members to. The key then is two things. One is keep growing that network of people that we know. And number two is, as members come on, let's understand who they want to meet and make those introductions. So if they're in India and they want to grow into Europe and they have a certain type of product and a certain type of company that they want to be introduced to, we make the warm introduction. So number one is the warm introduction. And this beats all of the cold stuff that happens out in the world. The warm
Absolutely.
introduction doesn't guarantee a sale, but 90% of the time there's at least a conversation. And that's really all most businesses want, is just give me a
Absolutely.
chance to tell people what we're doing and to match it up with what somebody needs. And invariably a sale happens over time. So that's by far number one. Number two, especially for service providers, is exposure. So they very often, even I've had Bank of America tell me, "Hey, not enough people know what we do." It's like, wow, if Bank of America has that challenge,
Right.
imagine what a law firm with a few lawyers or a variety of other anybody that has a service. Most people don't know what people do, and they
Yes.
end up making a lot of either mistakes or errors of omission because they didn't know about that financing program. They didn't know that you could do that with your exports. They didn't know that you have to do certain things with compliance relative to those products. And so the exposure of service providers to the exporters and the community is critically important. And then, last but not least is being part of the global tribe. So to your point, there's really no other organization that holistically looks at people who are thinking cross-border and have a community of people who are helping each other grow their business. There's nothing like it. The closest thing, and actually one of my inspirations, was Thunderbird School of Global Management. They do a really good job of getting their graduates to be very close to each other and connected to each other. And one of the things that always uh, uh, really impressed me, they used to have a campus in Glendale, Arizona. And Glendale, Arizona is probably the least international place you'd ever want to be. There's like nothing international there, except Thunderbird was there. So you'd go onto
Okay.
this campus that you kind of drive off, you find eventually this road that was called Global Way, and then now you're on this other world place where everybody's global, everybody's from somewhere else, everybody's talking about international, everybody has a passion for global. And then you leave and you're back into society, back into that place where nobody cares. They're only cared about local. So when I saw that, I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to have something like that more holistically? Where, yeah, Thunderbird is amazing. People should go to Thunderbird, but what if you don't go to Thunderbird? I didn't
Right.
go to Thunderbird, and I feel that way. Why can't others do that as well? And so those were some of the things that our members get. And so being part of the global tribe is not trivial, because the other people that are around you know global business. They love global business. They're passionate about global business. They want to help you with your global business, and that's an important thing.
Amazing. Right. Right. In fact, to all my audience, I would like to tell that I have myself personally benefited with a lot of introductions from Global Chamber. So these warm introductions, which Doug mentioned about, they work amazing because people do business with people first. So the moment there is an introduction from someone, then it goes to the company, then it goes to the product or service, and then it is price. So people to people referencing and connectivities, I have personally benefited, so I can vouch for that. Thank you for that explanation, Doug. So, Doug, what is your most memorable success story, example of a global chamber from members' point of view? It
You,
stands out in your mind.
sure. There's every day is fun at Global
All
Chamber
right.
because every
Yes.
day we get to see success and create more success. But thinking about that, one of my favorite examples is actually a very hot business right now, telemedicine. So telehealth, is a great example of an industry and a technology that was a no-brainer, is a no-brainer. We should have used telemedicine before, but here, sort of like Global Chamber, I think to some extent, right? It's like, yeah, you should be doing this, but now that you can't meet people in person, you can't get on a plane and fly somewhere very easily. Telemedicine makes a lot of sense, and so one of our members, Global Med, um, uh, they were interested in, and they continue to be interested in new countries. And so we made an introduction to someone I've known for a long time in Argentina, the number one health system within Argentina. So this seemed natural, right? A telemedicine company from the US hooked up with Argentina, where they have a passion for new technology, and they were very interested in this. And so they start working together. It starts moving forward. Success, right? So, except here's the other element of Global Chamber that I want to share. It's more than just the warm introduction. So maybe 2 or 3 months, maybe 4 months later, I get a call from Argentina. Doug, we need to talk. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, anytime. So he's on I think it was a WhatsApp call. He says, we've got a big problem. Things are off the track. They're not listening to us. They're way behind on schedule. And so a litany of things. It's like, oh my God. Okay.
Right.
So now, and I'm sure this way, Jagat, if you've made an introduction to somebody, you're kind of in there,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You want to make
Absolutely.
sure that they're both legit and
Yes.
they're real people, and you don't want anything to go wrong. And so I get on I call the CEO of the telemedicine company on my cell phone right away after the call. It's like, Joel, we got a problem. He's a, what? I can't believe it. I thought everything was going well. So lo and behold, after a couple days of sorting through, there were some issues. Over several weeks, there were things that were done back and forth between Argentina and the US. And it turned out the US company ended up, not within those weeks, but within a couple months, fired a couple people. There were some things that were not
Oh,
quite right going
okay.
on, not unethical, but things that were not being listened to. And so fast forward a couple, 3 months, I start hearing positive signs that things are back on track. And lo and behold, they did launch successfully. Both the companies involved are amazing, but there was some project challenges that happened, and we got involved to make sure that it was a successful project, and both members are happy, and actually both members just renewed in the last couple months. So those are the kinds of things we do get involved with. We mentioned about warm introductions, but we really care about the companies and we want them to succeed.
Very nice, very interesting example. Because yeah, you are right. The moment you do an introduction, it also becomes a moral responsibility to see to it that it reaches its conclusion. And whenever there are any hurdles, and this is something which generally other chambers do not do. This is what I have seen. The chambers do not play that role. So this is the most, I think, very very another powerful angle of global chamber. So, Doug, I was looking at your website, the website of Global Chamber, and I saw many sponsors also there, like UPS, and you had arranged my one of my meetings there in their office. It was amazing experience. So, how do these sponsors benefit, and how do they connect?
So they're the sponsors, and most of the people in that sponsor list are typically that second layer, the service providers that want
Okay,
exposure
right.
to the exporters. And so
Okay, I get
whether
it.
it's the logistics and banks and lawyers and places like that. And
Okay,
so what they're looking for is exposure. So, by
right.
hosting a Jagat Shah, what better exposure could they ever
Right.
receive than getting
Okay,
exposure from Jagat Shah and the companies
right.
that you're bringing to the US?
Right.
Also, there's a variety of things that we do. There's a law firm, for instance, in the U.S. based in Detroit, Dickinson Wright, and really one of their attorneys is by far the most intelligent, the most knowledgeable, the most articulate at USMCA, which is the new NAFTA, between the
Yeah.
agreement,
Right.
trade agreement between Canada, US, and Mexico. And so he takes and has taken multiple times a very complicated topic and makes it very clear to our members about what's happening. And now that it's happening July 1st.
Right. Right.
He's holding an event in a couple days that where, in fact, between now and July 1st, he's talking about that for companies and what they need to do. They actually need to do some things. And so, as a visionary sponsor that Dickinson Wright is, we help our members understand that they need to be connected to this. They need to listen. They need to be part of this. And so, those are some of the things that we do, whether it's the UPSs or the Dickinson Wrights or Bank of Americas who are there, that whatever they end up doing, if they're doing some projects, another law firm is Squire Patton Boggs, that does a lot of work right now with COVID-19 and keeping companies aware of what the opportunities are relative to government programs, things like that. So we're getting the word out about what Squire Patton Boggs is doing, and hence we're giving them some exposure. And ultimately, what happens, of course, is they get more clients themselves.
Okay, that's interesting. So, Doug, I have known your passion and your commitment to Global Chamber, and that itself is your extended family. But I would also like to know about your family, members of your family. What do they do? What type of support you got from them in Global Chamber, particularly in the initial years?
Okay, well, no, I appreciate that. Let's see. I would say maybe just as a general description is that I am the oldest child. So as an oldest child, I tend to be the responsible one, right? The one who does
Right.
looks out or tries to look out for everybody. Also, my mother always called me the smart one. So my brother
Hmm.
was the handsome one. I was the smart one. My younger brother was the handsome one. And then
And the
my
tall
younger
one.
sister, I'm sorry?
Also the tall one.
Actually, my brother and I are both tall.
Okay.
In fact,
Okay.
he's actually taller than I, so probably
Okay.
why he's
Okay.
more handsome than me. And then
Right.
my sister was the girl, so we each had our own little
Uh,
classification. So I think being labeled the smart one, set
hmm.
the expectation high. So when I was looking for a college degree, being a chemical engineer is a tough degree, and it was
Yeah.
one of the harder ones. And so that inspired me to kind of get there. I mentioned about my really strong mentor, my grandfather. He passed away within a few weeks of my first international trip. So
Oh,
really, I great that he actually saw that I did my
right.
first trip 33 years ago, and
Right.
he passed away 2 weeks later. So I got to at
Oh,
least chat with him about what I had done, but he had already kind of put in me that entrepreneurial spirit. So it took another 30 years almost for me to start Global Chamber, but he was very supportive along the way. And then I would say another key supporter, especially more recently, is my wife, who I've been married to for 38 years.
wow.
She works in the business. She always, and especially in the beginning, wondered how crazy I was to do this thing that she didn't fully understand in the beginning. She at least understands a lot more of it,
Mhm.
and at least tolerates my passion for it, and
Right.
is supportive. I'm being somewhat sarcastic. And then finally, my daughter. We have one daughter. She was always told me she'd never liked business. That she thought that was a bad thing. And she ended up becoming a nurse and now a nurse practitioner. So
Oh,
she's a
wow.
healthcare person. She's
Right.
total that kind of a person, but she
Right.
does have one little shred of entrepreneurial element in her. It turns out she married a guy who has 3 startups and he works for Tesla as an executive. So,
Oh,
so she is definitely a caregiver on the healthcare
right.
side, and she's an
Yeah.
amazing one. She's on the front lines in California, in the Palo
Yeah.
Alto at Stanford University, and she has this one little thing where Jimmy, her new husband, is very entrepreneurial. So, my wife and my daughter have been very supportive over the years. We've had a great life together, living internationally. And so I would say certainly they continue to be very supportive.
Excellent. Please convey my respects to your wife and my salute to your daughter, because the kind of work healthcare professionals are doing in America is amazing. It is putting themselves in the line of direct line, and amazing. I mean, for centuries, people are going to remember this and be very
Absolutely.
thankful.
I agree. Everywhere
So,
around the
absolutely, yeah, right, right. So Doug, what are your hobbies?
Well, you can kind of tell that, I'm an international business guy. So things that surround international business are typically hobbies. So eating and traveling and cross-cultural activities, arts related to cross-cultural. I've been a golfer over the years. I remember very vividly golfing in some countries around the world and being fairly tall again, and being the foreigner very often amongst many local people. I've always tended to stand out a little bit, and put pressure on my golf game because I'm
Right,
not that great.
right.
But I've always enjoyed it, and I've always enjoyed getting out. And of course, I love the camaraderie of building relationships with people, whether it's our own team, whether it's companies that we're doing business with, and really, I think a key part of my own thinking is I think of them together. I think of our team as our team, but it's somewhat it's hard to differentiate between ourselves and the clients, ourselves and our members. We're all one family, and hence the global tribe. And so those are some of the kind of the perspectives I think that have brought what is the unique global chamber.
Excellent. Thank you, Doug. So Doug, we are coming to the closing comments. But what are the three things you would like to see Global Chamber chapters doing after COVID and all this things settle down and the lockdown and is over and work starts? What would you want them to be doing? Three things.
So, we want to continue the global expansion, and I've been very heartened to hear from places that I hadn't heard from yet around the world, that are people interested to know more about Global Chamber and to start chapters in their local area. Typically, what we look for in a region is a person who has a global mentality, but they're also very well connected. That helps us build the network internationally. So I want to continue to see that. And I'm hoping and expecting I've got another 20 or 25 years of activity with Global Chamber. So I certainly, well before that, want to see in the next 5 to 10 years all 525 chapters fully built out, fully active, with many, many members, hundreds of members with each one. That's really what I'd love to see. And then sometime along that shorter term period, I would love to be able to turn over my CEO role to others and have the management of the team, be self-sufficient and continue to move on while I still am allowed to be part of Global Chamber. I mean, I want to be the person that continues to build the chapters and to find people, to support people, to help members, to build connections. One of the things, and I would say the third thing, is the beyond the warm connections, which largely I'd say 80% of the time are people that we know, and we kind of use that in our head. The other 20% are through the system, through artificial intelligence, that we find warm connections. And I see that flipping, so that we've got maybe at some point 80% of the warm introductions we make are actually through the technology, through artificial intelligence, that takes what people are looking for, looks through the database, and starts making connections, warm connections that I think artificial intelligence can do. And in fact, we've already started to demonstrate that, where the artificial intelligence that we're using through Gazelle.ai and other techniques that we use are very effective. We still have to filter a little bit, but it's still very beneficial. So those are I would say the three things. And I really do see that given the global perspective that we have, that we are uniquely positioned to allow that artificial intelligence to come into the prospecting for our members and make them more successful. And so continued success for our members is always number one in our minds.
Oh, wow. Okay, wonderful. So this is my last question, Doug, that what message would you like to give to global businesses around the world on life after COVID?
So, uh, I think one of you could make two conclusions from COVID. And I think the wrong conclusion is that we need to shelter down forever and close borders and do less globalization. That's the absolutely wrong
Right.
conclusion. And in
True.
fact, it's exactly why I started Global Chamber. When someone says we need to keep foreigners out of Arizona, that also was the wrong
Right.
conclusion. We
True.
see that, and we'll always have that in every country, by the way, that I've ever been. There's always some fraction of people that are ultra nationalist and want to kind of close the borders, or maybe they're not ultra nationalist. Some of them are just, hey, let's go back to this simple life where we're just kind of you and me on our street. And there's some attraction to that. The sustainability is very important, but ultimately the answer is that we're more connected than ever. And being more connected than ever means there's more opportunities than ever. So whether it's the personal protective equipment that we're seeing float around back
Right.
and forth across borders, or products or technologies, I think it's going to be primarily technologies that go back and forth that allow us to be more effective, live better lives everywhere in the world. We can't in any country invent everything ourselves.
True.
You look at what South Korea has done in terms of some of what they've done and how they've handled COVID-19. They're a model for around the world. Singapore's also done some good things and some bad things as well. So it's really important that we learn from each other, that we work together, and more than ever, I'm committed to and believe that globalization, the way we view it, where businesses are finding opportunities around the world, is expanding and will increase after COVID-19. So number one conclusion is be global. Think about how your products and services will be used going forward, because ultimately don't let the cross-cultural aspects and maybe the way people look, the way they dress, or the food they eat, or the clothes, or their skin color, or all the superficial things. All of that really is superficial. What's real is we're all the same. Underneath, we all
That's
want our
amazing.
children to be better
Amazing.
than us.
Absolutely.
We all want to have a roof over our heads. We all want to leave a mark. We don't want to just go underneath the ground and not have an impact on. We all want to have that impact. We all want to give back to the world. If we're allowed to do that, we'll do it. We want that. It's a human
Correct.
nature. Maslow talked about in his hierarchy. That's a human value. And so I would say COVID, especially like when I see Jagat, your daily messages about the lockdown, you're
Yeah,
talking
right.
about what's happening to you in India, but those
Yes.
are things that are happening to us in the US and to
Yes.
people in Italy. Those are human values, those are human emotions. So more than ever, we're connected. And so it took God and his perhaps infinite wisdom to bring, yes, a tremendous tragedy on people. But I think whether it's the ozone hole filling in for the world, or fish being seen in the Venice canals, or the air to be cleaned up across most of Asia, or people to recognize that we are humanly connected in a more fundamental way maybe than we could have ever imagined, that sets opportunity for us. And so we at Global Chamber certainly are looking at that as an opportunity for companies to take advantage of the world as their marketplace, to improve the lives of people, and to continue to build now this gift to some extent that we've been given, so that we make the world a better place.
Excellent. Wonderful. Doug, it was amazing speaking to you. I've known you for more than 3 years, but today what I came to know about you is amazing. And I've always believed that the personality of a company or an organization comes from the personality of the promoter or the leader. So, everything what you said is actually, I can see that in Global Chamber. So it is very reflective of, what you do. And again, congratulations and best wishes for Global Chamber to grow all over the world. And my audience, I want to tell you, friends, that you have heard the person, the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, very exhaustive information he has given and background. And I will motivate you to go to the website of Global Chamber and see the activities and join as a member. We business people, we have to take these opportunities which are coming in front of us. We have to act on it. If information comes to us and we don't act, I always tell people that it is almost criminal, because when we are running businesses, we are responsible to so many people who are working with us, their families, their careers. And therefore, every entrepreneur has a common sense. When you look at something, you can make out, yes, this is good for me, this is not good for me. So go into it, check it out. You have heard the founder and his passion, and join as member. It is an amazing networking platform. I have been beneficial, and you have heard from the horse's mouth today. So kindly join up, and Doug will be in touch with you when you join up to all these chapter ambassadors. And all the best to everybody. And thank you, Doug, once again. And do convey my regards to all the global tribe members, leaders, and your family. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jagat.
Thank you.